Good morning and welcome to Get Up on ESPN. And that picture tells maybe 1,000 words, if not more. If you are joining us this morning from anywhere on planet Earth, you are probably already aware that there are massive computer outages that are impacting almost every element of our lives. Don't ask me to explain them to you. I'm certainly not capable of doing so. I can tell you, however, that our program today is going to look a little bit different. We do not have video, we do not have sound bites, and we do not have graphics. But we have Dan Graziano, Ryan Clark, Mike Tannenbaum. We have everything we need to put together a sports talk show together today.
Dog.
And we've got Domonique Foxworth. You know what?
My computer works. My computer works. Why did everybody get theirs working?
That's a good point. Here's the bottom line. I have no earthly idea how it is possible that we cannot get graphics on the air, but somehow Domonique Foxworth from Washington is live and can hear us. Don't ask me to explain that, but somehow it's working. And so we're going to talk some football today. We have special guests coming, including the head football coach at Notre Dame will be here, and Ryan's son, Jordan, is going to be here with a bunch of the Notre Dame players. So it's going to be a terrific program we have for you. So it's going to look and feel a little different, and we're delighted you were along for the ride. Here's where it is going to begin. Right at the very top, as NFL training camps have begun, rookies and quarterbacks are reporting, and in a couple of cases, those two are one and the same. The quarterbacks in both Chicago and Washington are both rookies. You got Caleb Williams in Chicago, you have Jayden Daniels in Washington. And earlier this week, Mr. Clark, your fellow LSU brother, Mr. Booger McFarland, said on this show, quote, "Don't be surprised if we're having the same conversation we did last year with the number 2 pick, looking better than the number 1 pick. I think Caleb Williams is going to struggle, and Jayden will come out of the gate flying." What do you think of that?
I think, first off, calling anybody Mr. Booger is crazy.
That is not the way I meant that to come out, but okay.
Yeah, it is a crazy.
Work with me. I'm doing the best I can here.
Statement. When you think about Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels, both of these guys are the last 2 Heisman winners. And we looked at C.J. Stroud's year, not in the vacuum of just who C.J. Stroud was, but also what we saw from Bryce Young for the Carolina Panthers. I don't think we'll have that same sort of comparison this year. I believe that Caleb Williams will play well. I think what Ryan Poles has done to build a team around him of skilled players and him having a level of greatness that goes above the X's and O's, he'll figure out ways to have that team really good offensively. And don't forget how good they were down the stretch last year on the defensive side of the ball. And I think with Jayden Daniels, we may be sort of overrating what they have from a skill position standpoint in Washington. I think other than Terry McLaurin, there's a ton of question marks when you look at that offensive skill set. And obviously we saw what Brian Robinson was as a rookie, but that didn't necessarily continue into last year. And so I don't think there's going to be as big of a separation between these 2 quarterbacks this year as we saw last.
Although I like what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have done. Austin Eckler, 440 career receptions. Zach Ertz, I don't think they'll be there in 2 to 3 years, RC, but I think short term, those are ways for him to get rid of the ball quickly. I know when we had Mark Sanchez as a rookie, and Rex, who sits here every Monday with you guys, always talked about, hey, get rid of the ball, live to fight another day. My biggest concern about Jayden Daniels is he took some massive hits, and he has to learn to protect himself. If he can do that, I think they have a chance to have a really good year. As it relates to Caleb Williams, long-term, like they really may have 2 bona fide ones in DJ Moore and Roman Dunze, who I love. So I think long-term, I love where Chicago could be, but I think Washington, because some of those veterans, I think short-term, they could surprise some people this year.
You know, let me get Nick in here, because it really is a 2-pronged conversation. There's the idea of, well, will the guy who went number 2 wind up being better than the guy who went number 1? That's one question. Another question is one of them going to turn out to be really good and the other one going to struggle? I'm not writing Bryce Young off for the rest of his career by any means, but let's just say so far it has been a real struggle. History tells us these things are about a 50-50 shot. Nick, you were right there in Washington. What is your sense of, A, how good that team can be quickly and how good the quarterback is going to be?
Well, Washington is full of a lot of Mr. Boogers who are very excited about Jayden Daniels. I mean, spirits are high around here about what he can become. I think I agree with the points that everyone is making about the surrounding cast, but one of the boring things that I think impacts quarterbacks more than anything else is protection. And Washington had to overhaul that offensive line because they were unable to protect their quarterback last year. So we've yet to see how good that offensive line is going to be, but there's reason to be concerned for a quarterback who takes a lot of sacks and a quarterback who puts himself in dangerous situations, who's also not super big. There's reason to be concerned about him there. And in Chicago, they have a really great a really good defense and an offensive line that, when healthy, was very, very good and probably is going to get a little bit better. So the reason why I would lean more Caleb, despite the fact that I think they both will play well, I would lean more to Caleb is I don't think they're going to ask nearly as much of them. And their third receiver is Allen. So, like, they have a lot of places to take, a lot of ways to take pressure off of Caleb Williams. So they're going to be asking less of him than they will in Washington. So I think it'll allow him to develop a little bit better and a little sooner than Jayden Daniels here in D.C.
That's Keenan Allen, for those of you who aren't following that. It came over from the Chargers. So you're getting set to go on your training camp tour. I'm not sure if you're going to see either or both of these teams.
I'm going to see the Bears.
You will see the Bears. What is your early sense from what you are hearing about where these guys seem to be headed?
I think both teams are extremely excited about the guy they drafted. And that's after an offseason of seeing sort of how they pick things up. In Washington, I know they really do feel like if they can protect him, and they still have a question to answer at left tackle, but if they feel like if they can protect him, he's got a chance to be really good right away because of the number of different things he can do as a thrower, and also what he can add to the run game right away, you know, because of his talent with his legs, his experience. I mean, the guy played, 5-6 years of college football as a starting quarterback. So Caleb Williams in Chicago, I think they feel like they've got a good supporting cast around him. Keenan Allen, a specific addition they made when they figured out it was going to be Caleb because of how important Keenan Allen was to Justin Herbert his rookie year, right? And how they felt like he helped a rookie quarterback's development. So I personally, I'm going to echo what a lot of people here have said. I would not be surprised if we get to the end of the year and we say, oh, Jayden Daniels had a better year than Caleb Williams. I would be surprised if either one of them ended up having a rookie year like Bryce Young.
Microsoft Works or computers, but if y'all can't see truly the detail of Dan Graziano's sports coat, that is where you actually missed out today. But and that's the
more of it than usual. No,
and that's the thing too, though, guys. It's like it doesn't have to be either or. Right? Like both of these guys can have very good rookie seasons, and I think that's what they have an opportunity to do. They're special in different ways, and a lot of times you don't win the Heisman Trophy if you aren't, especially in today's football. Mike mentioned something about Jayden taking hits. That was something that was strange to me because before last year he didn't. Yeah. He was extremely slippery. He was the guy that got out of bounds, someone that got to the ground before taking some of that physicality that we saw from last year in the SEC. And so I think that's what Dan Quinn, that's what they're going to have to talk to him about, making sure this is not something you do by putting yourself in harm's way. And I think the thing that can hinder Caleb is if you try to handcuff him too much. There's going to be so much talk around Caleb about trying to make that extra play or not throwing the football on time. You don't want to paralyze him by having him analyze every single factor in each and every route progression. And so to me, it's about allowing these guys to be themselves and pulling back the reins when needed. But I do believe they both have talent to have really good rookie seasons.
Yeah, and they have talent to have great careers. What's interesting to me, guys, again, going back to my experience with Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez, obviously, Rex came out of the room as a defensive coach, but Dan Quinn is a defensive head coach. Matt Eberflus is a defensive head coach. DeMeco Ryans, defensive head coach, Houston. Look what C.J. Stroud did. And I think when you talk to those guys, how they see the game, even though the game has changed and it's about points and more wide open, if I was in Chicago, Washington, I'd be like, look, I don't care about the next 10 weeks. It's the next 10 years because these guys have such upside. So how we win games and control the games, it could be Brian Robinson. It could be Austin Eckler.
DeAndre Swift in Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does the coaching situation factor into this anywhere? Look, I have been very critical, and I don't take back a word of it, of the way the Bears have handled their coaching cycles, which is to say they've never matched up their general manager, their coach, and their quarterback. They continuously have one or another of them who's facing a make-or-break season, and it turns into this never-ending cycle. In Washington, they're just starting over again. I have no idea if it's going to work with Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury Kingsbury and Jayden Daniels, but at least they're kind of all in this together. They're all starting it together, and they'll give it a go. In Chicago, they're bringing in the brand new quarterback. He's got a brand new offensive coordinator. The head coach is still sitting there with the words lame duck practically attached to his title, and that's the part of this that concerns me, because it creates different levels of pressure to win games when you don't necessarily have to.
But Greeny, you could win for today and develop for tomorrow. If I'm Matt Eberflus, I know I got to win at least 9 games or whatever it is to keep my job, but we could do that by playing good defense, DeAndre Swift, and bring Caleb Williams along, because to RC's point, like, you don't want to stifle him, but you also have to tell Caleb Williams, you don't have to throw for 4,000 yards in September. Like, just play the quarterback position.
And I think that's why they feel good about the new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. This is a guy who's had success with different kinds of quarterbacks, right? Like, we can talk about the marriage of Cliff Kingsbury and Jayden Daniels in Washington and tie it back to Kyler Murray and say Cliff's worked with this kind of quarterback, and that may well be great. I think in Waldron, you're looking at a guy that has the experience with different kinds of quarterbacks who probably isn't going to want to stifle Caleb Williams, put him in a box right away, kind of lean on what he does well, iron out the things that he still needs to work on, and let him develop naturally. And I think that's how they feel about their coaching situation. In terms of Eberflus, you know, he saved his job last year with a big second half.
Right.
I don't know the organization is looking at it as, hey, Matt, this is a prove-it year. I understand the contract situation is what it is, but I don't think the organization is looking at it and going, well, if this isn't a good year.
I hope not. I mean, but they fired everybody else, right? They fired his entire staff, and we'll see, and he's the one who's still standing there. Nick, to me, it feels, look, you guys are all come from the inside of this thing. I come from the outside of it. But if there's one thing I know, it is generally it's a lot easier to prioritize one thing than it is to prioritize 2. So the most important thing you're prioritizing right now, if you're Chicago or Washington, is the development of a young quarterback, right? You need Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams to turn into a great player so that for the next 10 to 15 years, you have a chance to be what Kansas City and Buffalo and all these other teams are. It's not always easy to do that and try as hard as you can to win every single game at the same time. Neek.
Yeah, I mean, with these draft picks, and it seems like Chicago has done all the right things, with the exception, I think you could argue about the coaching decision, but I think what Eberflus did in the second half of the year, different isn't always better. And he may have gotten better as a coach, and they may have proven it. And I think the offensive coordinator situation there is one who's been able to put together offenses that allow a bunch of different quarterbacks to thrive in Waldron, and the one that takes pressure off of the quarterback with a lot of play action. So I understand why you might push back on that coaching situation, but I don't think it's terrible. I'm pretty excited about what they can do with all that talent and an experienced offensive coordinator. And I do think there are questions around how good Cliff Kingsbury is as a head coach in football, but I think as an offensive mind, he's going to be helpful to a player that's as dynamic as Jayden Daniels. So I actually think that both of these guys are in really, really uniquely good situations for rookie quarterbacks, and I'm excited to see them both have great seasons.
I think the point that he made is important, that Dan made, is because Matt Eberflus earned this year. This isn't a situation where he doesn't understand coaching under pressure. The only reason he is still the head coach in Chicago is because of the turnaround late in last season. And now when you add a guy like Shane Waldron, who was connected to Geno Smith, finding a way to become a Pro Bowl quarterback, I think Caleb Williams is uniquely positioned to have one of those years where we look at him like a C.J. Stroud, even though he was the first overall pick, and talk about the way that he helped the team elevate. I believe they're in the place behind the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers to be a team that's fighting for the wild card.